Sienna Vale was dying on a concrete floor inside a Brooklyn shipyard when she finally understood what loving a mafia boss actually cost. Blood pooled beneath her ribs. Rain hammered through broken windows. And somewhere in the darkness, Alessandro Moretti was tearing through armed men like vengeance incarnate. All because she'd walked into the wrong room 6 months ago and accidentally became the one thing the Ghost King of New York couldn't afford to lose. This is the story of a fake marriage that became terrifyingly real, a contract written in ink that got rewritten in blood. And the night one desperate woman collided with the most dangerous man in Manhattan and changed both their lives forever. If you want to see how far a mafia boss will go when someone finally breaks through the monster, stay until the end. And hit that like button. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to where it all started. Cold rain, wrong address, and a handshake that sealed Sienna's fate. The rain came down like punishment the night Sienna Vale's life split cleanly in two before and after. She stood outside a brownstone on East 73rd Street with water soaking through her only good coat and an address scrawled on the back of a coffee-stained receipt clutched in her freezing hand. The building looked exactly like the photograph Mrs. Chen had shown her 3 days earlier. Elegant limestone facade, black iron railings, discreet brass numbers beside a glossy front door. Housekeeper position. Room and board included. $3,500 a month. It was desperation dressed up as opportunity, and Sienna knew it. But when you're 28 years old with $14 in your checking account and an eviction notice taped to your apartment door, you don't question good luck. You just grab it before it changes its mind. She climbed the steps and pressed the buzzer. Nothing happened. She pressed it again, harder this time, and heard expensive-sounding chimes echo somewhere deep inside the building. Her stomach twisted with the particular nausea that comes from being broke enough to need something badly. The receipt in her hand was disintegrating in the rain. The ink bled across her palm like a bad omen. The door opened. A man in a dark suit looked at her with the flat expression of someone who'd been hired specifically for the ability to make people uncomfortable. He was built like a concrete wall stuffed into Italian tailoring. His eyes swept over her wet hair, her cheap coat, her scuffed boots, and dismissed her in less than 2 seconds. "You're lost," he said. Not a question. "I'm here for the housekeeper interview," Sienna said. "Mrs. Chen sent me." Something flickered across his face. Confusion, maybe. Or recognition of a name that didn't fit the context. "Stay here," he said, and shut the door in her face. Sienna stood in the rain for another 3 minutes, water running down her neck, wondering if this was some kind of test. Rich people did weird things. Maybe they wanted to see if applicants would wait patiently in bad weather, prove their work ethic before they even got inside. When the door opened again, a different man stood there. Older, silver hair, expensive watch, eyes like a reptile evaluating prey. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sienna Vale. I'm here about—" "I know why you're here." He stepped aside. "Come in." The interior didn't match the job description. Sienna had expected a nice home, maybe elegant, maybe a little old-fashioned. What she walked into looked like the lobby of a private bank designed by someone with unlimited money and no interest in warmth. Black marble floors, recessed lighting that cast sharp shadows, modern art that probably cost more than her childhood home. Everything gleamed with the kind of sterile perfection that suggested cleaning staff worked around the clock. This wasn't a house. It was a fortress pretending to be a residence. "Wait here," the silver-haired man said, and disappeared through a doorway. Sienna stood dripping on marble that probably cost more per square foot than she made in a month. Her boots squeaked. Water pooled around her feet. She felt like a stray dog someone had accidentally let inside. Voices drifted from somewhere deeper in the building, men talking in low tones, the kind of conversation that stops when outsiders get close. She should have left. Every instinct screaming in her gut said turn around, walk out, forget the address, pretend this never happened. But $3,500 a month, room and board, a chance to stop drowning. So Sienna stayed. The silver-haired man returned and gestured for her to follow. They walked down a corridor lined with more expensive art and through a set of double doors that opened into something between a conference room and a throne room. That's when Sienna realized she'd made a terrible mistake. 6 men sat around a table carved from a single piece of black marble. All of them wore suits that cost more than cars. All of them turned to look at her with varying expressions of confusion, amusement, and irritation. And at the head of the table, perfectly still in a charcoal suit with his hands folded in front of him like a prince receiving peasants, sat the youngest man in the room, Alessandro Moretti. Sienna didn't know his name yet, but she knew danger when she saw it. He couldn't have been older than 32, 33. Dark hair cut sharp enough to draw blood. Gray eyes the color of winter mornings. A face that would have been beautiful if it wasn't carved from ice and controlled violence. He looked at Sienna the way a surgeon looks at a problem, clinical, detached, already 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. "Who the fuck is this?" one of the older men asked. "She says she's here for a housekeeper interview," the silver-haired man replied. Several of the men laughed, not kindly. Alessandro didn't laugh. He just kept looking at Sienna with those gray eyes, and she felt something cold slide down her spine that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. "There's been a mistake," Sienna said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "I was given this address for a job interview. I'll go." She started to turn. "Stay," Alessandro said. It wasn't loud, wasn't aggressive, just a single word delivered in a voice that expected absolute obedience. Sienna stopped. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sienna Vale." "Who sent you here, Sienna Vale?" "A woman named Mrs. Chen. She said a family on the Upper East Side needed household staff." One of the men muttered something in Italian. Another one leaned back in his chair, grinning like this was the most entertaining thing that had happened all week. Alessandro held up one hand and the room went silent. "Vincent," he said, still looking at Sienna. "Explain to me how a random woman ends up in our headquarters asking about housework." The silver-haired man, Vincent, shifted his weight. "I'm handling it. That's not an explanation." "Someone fucked up an address," another man offered. "Probably that new scheduling girl. I told you hiring outside the family was—" "Enough!" Alessandro stood. "Everyone out." "Boss, we're in the middle of—" "Out." The room emptied in less than 30 seconds. The men filed past Sienna without looking at her, which somehow felt worse than if they'd stared. Vincent was the last to leave. He paused at the door like he wanted to say something, then thought better of it and disappeared. The door clicked shut. Sienna was alone with Alessandro Moretti. He walked around the table slowly, hands in his pockets, studying her the way someone studies a puzzle they haven't decided whether to solve or throw away. "You have no idea where you are, do you?" he asked. "A very expensive house," Sienna said. "Do you follow the news, Sienna?" "Not really." "Do you know what the Moretti name means in this city?" Something in his tone made her stomach drop. "Should I?" Alessandro smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "You walked into the private headquarters of the largest organized crime syndicate on the East Coast," he said. "The men you just saw run everything from the docks to City Hall. They've killed more people than you've met in your entire life, and you're standing here because someone wrote down the wrong address." The room tilted slightly. Sienna gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. "I should go," she whispered. "You should," Alessandro agreed. "But you won't." "Why not?" "Because you need money." He said it like he was reading a medical chart. "You're broke, desperate, probably facing eviction, maybe worse. You took a job interview from a stranger because you didn't have better options, and now you're calculating whether being terrified is worth whatever salary you were promised." Sienna's throat went dry. He wasn't guessing. He knew. "I'll forget this happened," she said. "Will you?" "Yes." Alessandro tilted his head slightly, still studying her. "You're a terrible liar," he said, "but I believe you'd try." He walked back to his chair and sat down, gesturing for Sienna to take the seat across from him. When she hesitated, he added, "Relax. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. Sit." Sienna sat. The chair was leather and probably cost more than her entire year's rent. She perched on the edge like it might explode. Alessandro leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "I'm going to offer you something," he said, "and I need you to listen very carefully before you respond. I need a wife." The words hung in the air like smoke. Sienna stared at him. "Excuse me?" "Not a real wife," Alessandro clarified. "A contract, 6 months. You play the role convincingly, and I pay you enough money to solve whatever financial problems brought you here tonight. This is insane. This is business." Sienna laughed. It came out sharp and slightly hysterical. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. You're desperate but not stupid. Scared but still standing here. You walked into a room full of criminals and didn't scream or faint or call the police. That's more spine than most people have. I thought it was a housekeeper interview. And now you know it isn't." Alessandro leaned forward. "I'm going to be very clear with you, Sienna. The men you saw in this room are getting old, traditional. They believe the head of this organization needs a wife, stability, and heir. Without that, they question my leadership. They start making moves. And when mafia families start questioning leadership, people die. So get married. Find someone in this world." Alessandro's smile turned cold. "Every woman connected to organized crime comes with a family, alliances, expectations. Marrying inside the life means creating new power structures I don't control. I need someone clean, someone with no connections, someone I can trust to disappear when the contract ends." "You don't trust me." "I don't trust anyone. But you're not ambitious enough to be dangerous, and you're desperate enough to be controllable." It should have sounded insulting. It just sounded true. Sienna shook her head. "This is crazy. I can't. $500,000. The number hit her like cold water. "What?" "6 months, you move into my penthouse, attend events, play the role of my fiancée, and then wife. You smile for cameras, wear expensive clothes, and make the traditionalists happy. At the end of 6 months, we divorce quietly. You walk away with $500,000, a new identity if you want one, and enough distance from New York that no one will ever connect you to this again." Sienna's hands were shaking. $500,000, $500,000. She could pay off her debts, leave the city, start over somewhere nobody knew her name or her failures. "Why me?" she asked. "Wrong place, wrong time," Alessandro said. "But sometimes accidents are useful. You have no ties to this world, no family in the city, no boyfriend based on your body language. You're invisible enough to be safe and pretty enough to be believable. And if I say no, then you leave. Vincent will drive you home. You forget this address, and we both pretend tonight never happened." Just like that? Alessandro's expression didn't change. "I'm a businessman, Sienna, not a monster. You're not a threat. You're a mistake. I'm offering to turn that mistake into an opportunity for both of us." She should have said no. Should have run. Should have listened to every survival instinct screaming in her head. But $500,000, 6 months, and a chance to stop drowning. "If I say yes," Sienna said slowly, "how do I know you won't kill me when it's over?" "You don't." Alessandro stood and extended his hand. "But if I wanted to kill you, you'd already be dead. I need you alive, I need you convincing, and I need you to decide right now, because the longer you sit in this building, the more dangerous it becomes for both of us." Sienna looked at his hand, looked at his face, looked at the door she could still walk through. $500,000. She stood up and shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and absolutely certain. 6 months, Sienna said. 6 months, Alessandro agreed. And just like that, Sienna Vale stopped being nobody and became the future wife of the most dangerous man in New York. The contract arrived the next morning. Sienna sat in her tiny studio apartment, the one she'd be evicted from in 9 days, and read through 43 pages of legal language that basically said, "Pretend to love me, don't betray me, survive 6 months, get paid." There were rules. No contact with former friends or family during the contract period. No romantic relationships with anyone else. No interviews, social media posts, or public statements without approval. Attend all required events. Behave appropriately. Maintain the illusion. At the bottom of the last page, Alessandro had signed in black ink. Below his signature was a blank line for hers. Sienna's hand hovered over the paper. This was insane. Illegal, probably. Definitely dangerous. But when she looked around her apartment, at the water stain on the ceiling, the secondhand furniture, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, she couldn't think of a single good reason to say no. So she signed. 2 hours later, a black car pulled up outside her building. The driver didn't introduce himself, just loaded her 2 suitcases into the trunk and drove her across the city to a building she'd only ever seen in magazines. The Moretti Tower. 68 floors of steel and glass overlooking Central Park. Alessandro owned the top 5. The elevator required a key card and a fingerprint scan. It moved so smoothly, Sienna couldn't tell they were rising until the numbers on the display started climbing past 40. When the doors opened, she stepped directly into the penthouse. Calling it an apartment felt insulting. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan, like the city was a toy Alessandro had purchased and displayed. The furniture looked designed by someone who understood exactly how much empty space communicated power. Everything was sharp angles, dark colors, and controlled elegance. A woman in her 50s appeared from a side hallway. "Miss Vale, I'm Elena. I manage the household." She had a slight accent, Russian maybe, and the demeanor of someone who'd seen everything and judged most of it. "Your rooms are this way." Sienna followed her through a corridor past a kitchen bigger than her entire apartment, a dining room that could seat 20, and a library that looked like it had never been touched. Her bedroom was at the end of the hall. It was twice the size of her studio. King bed, private bathroom, walk-in closet, windows overlooking the park. "Mr. Moretti's room is at the opposite end of the penthouse," Elena said. "You have your own space. He values privacy." "Where is he?" Sienna asked. "Working. He's always working." Elena handed her a phone. "This is yours. It has one contact programmed, Vincent. He handles security and scheduling. If you need anything, call him. If you have questions, call him. If you leave this building without permission, call him first." "I'm a prisoner?" Elena's expression didn't change. "You're protected. There's a difference. Dinner's at 7. Dress appropriately." She left. Sienna stood alone in her new bedroom and tried to process what she'd done. 6 months, $500,000. How hard could it be, Mom? Dinner was terrifying. Alessandro sat at one end of a table designed for 12. Sienna sat at the other end. 20 feet of polished wood separated them. Elena served food that probably cost more than Sienna used to spend on groceries in a month. Everything was perfectly plated, elegantly presented, and tasted like absolutely nothing because Sienna's stomach was clenched too tight to appreciate it. Alessandro ate in silence. Sienna pushed food around her plate and tried not to stare at him. In better lighting, he was even more unsettling than he'd been the night before. The kind of handsome that didn't invite warmth. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, gray eyes that gave away absolutely nothing. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and Sienna noticed scars on his forearms, thin white lines that looked like they'd been put there on purpose. "You're staring," Alessandro said without looking up. Sienna's face heated. "Sorry." "Don't apologize, just stop." She looked down at her plate. Silence stretched. Finally, Alessandro set down his fork. "Tomorrow night, there's a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum," he said. "You'll attend with me. Vincent will take you shopping in the morning. Get whatever you need. Dress, shoes, jewelry. There's no budget." "What kind of gala?" "The kind where people with too much money pretend to care about art while making deals in corners." He picked up his wine glass. "You'll smile, hold my arm, and let me introduce you as my fiancé. Can you do that?" "I don't know how to act like what?" "Like someone who belongs at a Metropolitan Museum gala." Alessandro's mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile. "You don't belong. That's the point. You're new, unexpected, a mystery. Let them wonder who you are and why I chose you. That's more interesting than anything you could say. What if someone asked me questions?" "Keep your answer short. Smile. Redirect to me." He stood. "This isn't complicated, Sienna. You're not performing brain surgery. You're standing next to me and looking like you want to be there. And if I mess up, then we adjust." He walked toward the hallway. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." He disappeared. Sienna sat alone at the enormous table, surrounded by wealth she'd never imagined, and wondered how long it would take before she stopped feeling like an imposter. Shopping with Vincent was surreal. He picked her up at 9 in the morning and drove her to a boutique in Soho that didn't have a sign on the door. Inside, the staff treated Vincent like royalty, and Sienna like she was already important. "Mr. Moretti called ahead," the woman managing the store said. Her name was Isabel, and she had the kind of French accent that made everything sound elegant, We've prepared several options. Several meant 24 evening gowns in a private fitting room. Sienna tried on dresses that cost more than she used to make in 6 months. Silk that felt like water. Beading that caught light like diamonds. Colors she didn't have names for. "That one," Vincent said when she stepped out in a floor-length emerald gown with a neckline that made her feel exposed and powerful at the same time. "You're sure?" "Boss will like it." "How do you know?" Vincent's expression was unreadable. "I know. They bought the dress, and shoes, and a clutch, and jewelry that Isabel insisted was costume, but looked real enough to make Sienna nervous about wearing it outside. On the drive back, Vincent spoke for the first time without being asked a question. "You seem like a decent person," he said. Sienna looked at him. "Is that a compliment?" "It's a warning." He kept his eyes on the road. "Don't fall for him." "I'm not. I've worked for Alessandro Moretti for 8 years. I've seen him kill men without blinking. I've watched him destroy lives because it was strategically useful. He's good at what he does because he doesn't feel things the way normal people do." "Then why are you warning me?" Vincent glanced at her. "Because you're not like the people he usually deals with, and I don't want to watch him break you when this is over." The car pulled up outside Moretti Tower. Vincent handed her the shopping bags. 6 months?" he said. "Keep your head down, play the role, take the money and disappear. Don't make it complicated." Sienna nodded, but something in her chest tightened, because she was starting to realize that nothing about Alessandro Moretti was simple. The gala was exactly as overwhelming as Sienna had feared. She stood next to Alessandro beneath chandeliers that cost more than most houses, surrounded by people whose names appeared in Forbes and gossip columns. Everyone sparkled. Everyone smiled with perfect teeth. Everyone looked at her like they were trying to figure out where she fit in the puzzle. Alessandro kept one hand on the small of her back. Light touch. Possessive without being aggressive. It burned through the silk of her dress like a brand. "Smile," he murmured near her ear. Sienna smiled. A woman in diamonds approached, late 50s, surgically perfect face. "Alessandro, darling." She kissed the air near his cheek. "You've been hiding." "I've been busy, Catherine." "I can see that." Catherine's eyes slid to Sienna. "And who is this?" "Sienna Vale," Alessandro said. "My fiancé." Catherine's smile froze, just for a second. Then she recovered with the skill of someone who'd spent decades pretending. "How wonderful. I didn't realize you were seeing anyone." "It happened quickly," Sienna said, repeating the line Alessandro had told her to use. "How modern." Catherine's gaze sharpened. "And what do you do, Sienna?" "I'm transitioning careers," Sienna said. Another scripted answer. "From what to what?" Alessandro's hand tightened slightly on Sienna's back. "Catherine, you'll have to excuse us," he said smoothly. "I promised Sienna a tour of the new wing." They moved away. Sienna's heart hammered. "Did I mess up?" she whispered. "No, Catherine's a shark. She smells uncertainty." Alessandro guided her toward a quieter corner. "You did fine." "She hated me." "She hates everyone. Don't take it personally." They spent the next 2 hours circulating through the crowd. Alessandro introduced Sienna to dozens of people whose names blurred together. Politicians, businessmen, society wives. Everyone smiled. Everyone made polite conversation. And everyone looked at Sienna like she was a problem they couldn't quite figure out. By 10 o'clock, her feet hurt and her face ached from smiling. Alessandro seemed to sense it. "Let's go," he said. They were halfway to the exit when a man stepped into their path. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark suit. Handsome in the same dangerous way Alessandro was handsome, but rougher, less controlled. "Leaving already?" the man asked. Alessandro's entire posture changed, subtle, but Sienna felt it, tension coiling beneath expensive fabric. "Marco," Alessandro said, flat, cold. Marco grinned. "Aren't you going to introduce me to your mystery woman?" "No." "Come on, boss, we're family." Something flickered in Alessandro's eyes, something violent, but his voice stayed calm. "Sienna, this is Marco DeLuca, my underboss." Marco extended his hand. "Pleasure." Sienna shook it. His grip lingered too long. "You're a surprise," Marco said, still holding her hand. Alessandro doesn't usually bring dates to public events. I'm not a date, Sienna said. I'm his fiancée. Marco's smile widened. Even more surprising. Alessandro stepped between them, breaking the handshake. We're leaving, he said. Marco raised both hands in mock surrender. Enjoy your night. He walked away. Sienna felt Alessandro's hand tighten on her back again as they headed for the exit. In the car, he stared out the window, jaw tight, saying nothing. Did I do something wrong? Sienna asked. No. Then why are you… Marco's ambitious, Alessandro said. He thinks I'm weak because I'm young. He's waiting for me to make a mistake. And showing up with me is a mistake? Alessandro looked at her. Showing up with you is either the smartest thing I've ever done or the most dangerous. I haven't decided which yet. The car pulled up outside Moretti Tower. They rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened into the penthouse, Alessandro headed straight for his office without saying goodnight. Sienna stood alone in the massive living room and wondered what the hell she'd gotten herself into. The next 3 weeks moved in a blur. Sienna's days became a strange routine. Mornings alone in the penthouse while Alessandro worked. Afternoons with Vincent, learning how to navigate Alessandro's world. Evenings at dinners, galas, charity events, always on Alessandro's arm. She learned how to smile without meaning it, how to deflect questions, how to stand next to Alessandro Moretti and look like she belonged there. But late at night, when the penthouse was dark and silent, Sienna lay awake in her enormous bed and felt the weight of the lie pressing down on her chest. She was playing a role, living a life that wasn't hers, and slowly, terrifyingly, it was starting to feel real. Alessandro remained distant, polite but cold. He spoke to her when necessary, touched her when appearances demanded it, and otherwise treated her like an employee he'd hired to solve a problem, which was exactly what she was. Until the night everything changed. Sienna woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of something breaking. She lay in bed, heart pounding, trying to decide if she'd imagined it. Then she heard it again. Glass shattering. She got up and moved quietly down the hallway. Light spilled from beneath Alessandro's office door. Sienna hesitated, then knocked softly. Go away, Alessandro's voice said. She opened the door anyway. Alessandro stood behind his desk with a tumbler of whiskey in one hand and broken glass scattered across the floor near the far wall. He'd thrown something, hard. He looked at her with eyes that were too bright and too empty at the same time. I said go away. You're bleeding, Sienna said. Alessandro glanced down at his hand. Blood dripped from a cut across his palm, where he'd apparently gripped broken glass without noticing. It's fine. It's not fine. Sienna crossed the room and took his hand before he could pull away. The cut wasn't deep, but it was messy. She grabbed a clean handkerchief from his desk and wrapped it around his palm, applying pressure. Alessandro stared at her like she'd done something incomprehensible. Why are you here? He asked. I heard breaking glass. I meant, why are you here? In this penthouse, in this life. He pulled his hand away. You should have walked out that first night and never looked back. I needed the money. Everyone needs money. Not everyone signs a contract with a criminal. Sienna met his eyes. You're not a monster, Alessandro. He laughed, sharp and bitter. Yes, I am. Then why haven't you hurt me? Because you're useful. Bullshit! The word hung in the air between them. Alessandro's expression shifted. Something dangerous flickered beneath the surface. You don't know anything about me, he said quietly. I know you don't sleep. I know you drink alone in your office at 3 a.m. I know you throw things when you're angry because it's safer than hitting people. Sienna took a step closer. And I know you hate this life as much as I'm starting to. You don't hate it. You're just scared. So are you. Alessandro moved so fast she didn't see it coming. 1 second he was behind his desk. The next he was in front of her, close enough that she could smell whiskey and expensive cologne and something darker underneath. I'm not scared of anything, he said. Then why are your hands shaking? He looked down. His hands were shaking. Something in Alessandro's face cracked, just for a second. Then he turned away and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. My father built this empire, he said. He was brutal, efficient, terrifying. Everyone respected him. Everyone feared him. And when he died, they expected me to be exactly like him. But you're not. No. Alessandro's voice was barely audible. I'm worse. Sienna moved to stand beside him at the window. What happened tonight? She asked. Marco's making moves, quiet ones, testing boundaries, seeing how far he can push before I push back. So push back. If I push back the way my father would have, people die. If I don't push back, I look weak. Either way, I lose. Then find a third option. Alessandro looked at her. There is no third option in this world. Then maybe you're in the wrong world. The words came out before Sienna could stop them. Alessandro stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, something in his expression softened. You really believe that, he said. You actually think I could just walk away. I think you're more than what your father made you. You don't know what he made me. So tell me. And for the first time since Sienna had met him, Alessandro Moretti looked like he wanted to. But before he could speak, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, read the screen, and his entire demeanor changed. Cold, controlled. The crack she'd glimpsed sealed shut. Go back to bed, he said. Alessandro, Now, Sienna. His tone left no room for argument. Sienna left. But as she walked back to her room, she realized something that made her chest tighten with fear. She wasn't pretending anymore. Somewhere between the contract and tonight, between the galas and the late-night conversations, between playing a role and living a lie, she'd started to care. And caring about Alessandro Moretti was the most dangerous thing she could possibly do. The morning after Alessandro's office broke apart in his hands, Sienna woke to find Vincent standing in her doorway. Not knocking, just standing there with his arms crossed and an expression that said someone had made a mistake and he was here to clean it up. Get dressed, he said. We're leaving in 20 minutes. Sienna sat up, pulling the blanket to her chest. Where are we going? Shopping. Boss wants you ready for the engagement party this weekend. What engagement party? The one he's throwing to make this look real. Vincent checked his watch. 19 minutes now. He left. Sienna got dressed in the walk-in closet that still felt like someone else's life. Designer clothes she hadn't chosen. Shoes that cost more than her old rent. A reflection in the mirror that looked like her but moved through a world she didn't recognize. She'd signed up for 6 months of pretending. What she hadn't signed up for was 3 a.m. conversations that felt more real than anything else in her life. Vincent drove her to a different boutique. Uptown this time. Even more exclusive than the last one. The kind of place where you needed an appointment just to look in the window. Inside, a woman with silver hair and perfect posture introduced herself as Margot, and immediately began pulling dresses like she was preparing for war. Mr. Moretti was very specific, Margot said. He wants elegant but not fragile. Sophisticated but not cold. You should look like someone who chose him, not someone he bought. Sienna felt something twist in her chest. Did he actually say that? Word for word. Margot held up a champagne-colored gown with beading that caught light like water. Try this one first. The dress fit perfectly. Of course it did. Alessandro probably knew her measurements better than she did at this point. While Margot adjusted the hem, Sienna caught Vincent watching her in the mirror with that unreadable expression he wore like armor. You can ask, Vincent said. Ask what? Whatever you're thinking right now. Sienna hesitated. How long have you worked for him? 8 years. Have you ever seen him with anyone else? Before me? Vincent's jaw tightened slightly. You mean women? I mean anyone, someone he cared about. Boss doesn't care about people. He uses them. That's not an answer. Vincent looked at her for a long moment. There was someone, 5 years ago, Francesca. Daughter of a politician who didn't know Alessandro's last name meant blood money. She thought he was just a businessman. What happened? She found out what he really was. Left in the middle of the night. Didn't even pack a bag. Vincent's voice stayed flat. Alessandro didn't chase her, didn't try to explain, just watched her go and never mentioned her again. Sienna's throat felt tight. Did he love her? I don't know if he's capable of that. But you stayed. 8 years. That means something. Vincent's expression shifted. Something almost like respect flickered across his face. Boss saved my life once, he said quietly. Didn't have to. Didn't gain anything from it. He just did it because it was the right move at the time. That's who Alessandro Moretti is. He makes calculated decisions that sometimes look like kindness. Don't mistake strategy for feelings. Margot returned with shoes and jewelry. Vincent stepped back, but his words stayed with Sienna like a warning she couldn't shake. The engagement party happened on a Saturday night in the ballroom of a hotel that probably hosted more illegal deals than weddings. Sienna stood in front of the mirror in her champagne gown, while Elena fixed her hair into something elegant and painful. "You look beautiful," Elena said. Not warmly, just factually. "I look terrified." "That too." Elena met her eyes in the mirror. "But Mr. Moretti chose well. You photograph better than the last 3 women," Marco suggested. Sienna's stomach dropped. Marco suggested women? Of course. Underbosses always try to plant their own people close to power. It's tradition. Elena pinned the last curl into place. But Alessandro chose you instead. That makes you either very lucky or very dangerous. I haven't decided which. A knock at the door. Alessandro stepped in wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than a car and looked like violence wrapped in silk. His gray eyes swept over Sienna once, clinical and assessing, before he nodded. "Perfect," he said. "Not you look perfect, just perfect. Like she was a problem he'd solved correctly." "We need to talk about tonight," Alessandro said. He dismissed Elena with a gesture and closed the door. "There will be over 200 people downstairs. Half of them work for me. The other half want to see if you're real or if I'm bluffing." "I'm real," Sienna said. "Are you?" Alessandro moved closer. "Because right now you look like you're about to run." "I'm not running." "Good. Because running makes you look weak. And if you look weak, I look weak. And if I look weak, men like Marco start making moves." "Is everything about optics with you?" Alessandro's expression didn't change. "In my world? Yes." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sienna's heart hammered. Alessandro opened it. Inside was a ring that probably cost more than most houses. Platinum band, diamond that caught light like a weapon. "Give me your hand," Alessandro said. Sienna extended her left hand. Her fingers trembled. Alessandro slid the ring onto her finger with the efficiency of someone signing a contract. The metal was cold. The diamond was heavy. It felt like a shackle disguised as jewelry. "There," Alessandro said. "Now it's official." "This doesn't feel official. It feels like a transaction. Because that's what it is." Alessandro stepped back. "Don't forget that, Sienna. No matter what happens tonight, no matter how real it looks, this is business." He left. Sienna stared at the ring on her finger and tried to remember why she'd agreed to this. $500,000, 6 months, a chance to start over. But standing in a hotel room wearing someone else's dress with a diamond that meant nothing on her hand, Sienna couldn't shake the feeling that she'd sold something more valuable than her time. The ballroom was full of people who smiled with their mouths and calculated with their eyes. Alessandro kept Sienna on his arm like a prize he was displaying. Every few minutes, someone new approached to offer congratulations that sounded more like interrogations. "How did you meet? When's the wedding? Have you set a date?" Sienna repeated the answers Alessandro had given her. "Met through mutual friends. Wedding next spring. Still planning the details." All lies delivered with a smile that made her face ache. Across the room, Marco De Luca watched with an expression that made Sienna's skin crawl. He wasn't celebrating. He was studying, looking for cracks in the performance. Around midnight, Alessandro excused himself to handle something with Vincent. Sienna stood alone near the bar, suddenly exposed without him beside her. A woman approached, early 30s, beautiful in the dangerous way models and actresses are beautiful. Dark hair, red dress, eyes like knives. "You must be Sienna," the woman said. Her voice carried the faint trace of an Italian accent. "I'm Gabriella, Marco's sister." Sienna shook her hand. "Nice to meet you." "Is it?" Gabriella's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You seem nervous." "It's a big night." "I'm sure." Gabriella sipped champagne. "You know, Alessandro has always been very careful about who he lets close. Very calculated. So when he suddenly announces an engagement to someone nobody's ever heard of, It raises questions. What kind of questions? The kind that wonder if you're real or if you're a strategy. Gabriella tilted her head. Which are you, Sienna? Before Sienna could answer, Alessandro appeared at her side. His hand settled on the small of her back. Possessive, protective. Gabriella, Alessandro said. Cold, flat. Alessandro. Gabriella's smile widened. I was just getting to know your lovely fiancée. I'm sure you were. She's very pretty, very unexpected. That's the appeal. Gabriella laughed, sharp and brittle. Well, I hope she lasts longer than the last one. She walked away. Sienna felt Alessandro's hand tighten on her back. Ignore her, he said. She mentioned someone before me. Gabriella mentions a lot of things. Most of them are designed to cause problems. Was there someone before me? Alessandro's jaw tightened. This conversation isn't appropriate here. Then where is it appropriate? Nowhere. He guided her toward the exit. We're leaving. The party's not over. It is for us. They left through a side entrance while people were still drinking and dancing and pretending to be happy for them. In the car, Alessandro stared out the window with his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Sienna watched the city blur past and felt the weight of the ring on her finger getting heavier. There was someone, Alessandro said finally, 5 years ago. She left when she found out who I really was. Did you love her? Alessandro turned to look at her. Love is a liability in my world. I don't allow liabilities. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. They rode the rest of the way in silence. The next 2 weeks felt like walking through a minefield blindfolded. Sienna attended more events, smiled through more interrogations, wore more expensive clothes while feeling more exposed than ever. And every night, she went to bed alone in her enormous room while Alessandro worked in his office until dawn. They barely spoke. When they did, it was tactical, necessary, transactional. But late at night, Sienna started hearing sounds from Alessandro's office again, breaking glass. Low voices on phone calls that ended abruptly. Once, she heard him shouting in Italian at someone who wasn't there. She didn't knock. Vincent had warned her, don't make it complicated. But one night, Sienna woke up to complete silence. No breaking glass, no phone calls. Nothing. And somehow that was worse. She got up and moved down the hallway. Alessandro's office door was open. He sat behind his desk with his head in his hands, perfectly still, like a statue of exhaustion carved from marble. You're supposed to be asleep, he said without looking up. So are you. I don't sleep. I know. Alessandro raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot. His hair was disheveled. He looked like he'd been fighting a war inside his own skull and losing. What do you want, Sienna? I want to know if you're okay. I'm fine. You're not fine. You look like you're falling apart. Alessandro laughed, dark and bitter. I've been falling apart for 5 years. I'm just better at hiding it than most people. Sienna crossed the room and sat in the chair across from his desk. Talk to me. Why? Because I'm here. Because I signed the contract. Because pretending you're okay is exhausting for both of us. Alessandro stared at her for a long moment. Then he poured 2 glasses of whiskey and slid one across the desk. Marco's making moves, he said. Real ones this time. He's been meeting with the Calabrese family. Old enemies. The kind who'd love to see the Moretti Empire collapse. What does that mean? It means he's preparing for a coup. He thinks I'm weak, distracted. That bringing you into this world was a mistake that proves I'm not fit to lead. Are you? What? Fit to lead. Alessandro's expression darkened. That's not a question you should be asking. Why not? If Marco's right. Marco's not right. He's ambitious. There's a difference. Alessandro drank his whiskey in one swallow. My father built this empire on blood and fear. Marco thinks I'm soft because I don't kill everyone who looks at me wrong. But fear only works until someone stops being afraid. Then it collapses. So what's your strategy? I make them respect me instead. And if they don't? Then I remind them why fear worked. The words hung in the air like smoke. Sienna drank her whiskey and felt it burn all the way down. You scare me sometimes, she said quietly. Good. You should be scared. But I'm still here. Alessandro looked at her, really looked at her, like he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before. Why? He asked. I don't know. The contract gives you an out. If things get dangerous, you can walk away with partial payment and a new identity. Vincent made sure that clause was included. I know. So why are you still here? Sienna met his eyes. Because you're not the monster everyone thinks you are. Alessandro stood abruptly. You don't know what I am? Then show me. Why? Because I'm tired of pretending I don't care. The words came out raw and unfiltered. Sienna hadn't meant to say them, but now they were out there, hanging between them like a confession. Alessandro moved around the desk slowly, predatory, controlled. He stopped in front of her chair. You care, he said. Not a question. I'm not supposed to. No, you're not. But I do. Alessandro's hand came up to touch her face. His thumb brushed her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. That's the most dangerous thing you could possibly do, he said softly. I know. You should leave right now, before this gets worse. I'm not leaving. Why not? Sienna stood. They were inches apart now, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him, close enough to see the scars on his knuckles, close enough to smell expensive cologne and whiskey and something darker underneath. Because you need someone who isn't afraid of you, she said. Everyone's afraid of me. I'm not. You should be. But I'm not. Alessandro's hand slid to the back of her neck. His grip was firm but not violent, controlled but barely. If I kiss you right now, he said, voice low and dangerous, this stops being a contract. I know. Everything changes. I know. You could still walk away. So could you. Alessandro's eyes searched hers, looking for doubt, looking for fear, looking for a reason to stop. He didn't find one. His mouth came down on hers hard and desperate, and absolutely nothing like the staged kisses they'd performed for cameras. This was real. This was dangerous. This was the line they'd just crossed with no way back. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, Alessandro pressed his forehead against hers. This is a mistake, he said. Probably. I'm going to hurt you. Maybe. You should run. I'm not running. Alessandro pulled back just far enough to look at her. Then you're as broken as I am, he said. Probably. He kissed her again. Slower this time, like he was memorizing something he knew wouldn't last. And somewhere in the back of Sienna's mind, a voice whispered that Vincent had been right. Don't fall for him. Too late. She already had. Everything changed after that night. Not publicly. They still attended events, still played the role of the perfectly engaged couple. But privately, in the penthouse when no one was watching, the walls between them crumbled. Alessandro started sleeping in Sienna's room. Not every night, but enough. Enough that she woke up to find him beside her, close enough to touch, vulnerable in a way he never was during the day. Enough that she started to see the man beneath the Mafia boss. The insomnia that came from years of watching his back. The scars that mapped a history of violence he never talked about. The way his hands shook when he thought no one was looking. They talked in the dark, about his father, about the empire, about the weight of expectations that had been crushing him since he was 23 years old and suddenly in charge of an organization built on blood. About Francesca, the woman who left, the ghost that still haunted him. She was right to go, Alessandro said one night. I would have destroyed her eventually. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Everyone close to me gets hurt. It's not a possibility. It's a guarantee. Then why let me stay? Alessandro pulled her closer. Because I'm selfish. And you make me feel human. It should have been romantic. Instead, it felt like a warning. My man. 3 weeks after they crossed the line, Vincent showed up at the penthouse with news that made Alessandro's face go cold. Sienna was in the kitchen when she heard raised voices from the office. She moved closer. Happened last night, Vincent was saying. Warehouse on the docks. Someone torched it. 3 men dead. Which warehouse? The one we use for the Calabrese shipments. Silence. Then Alessandro's voice, dangerously quiet. Marco. We don't know that. It's Marco. He's forcing my hand, making me look weak in front of the families. What do you want to do? Set up a meeting, all the capos, tomorrow night. Boss? Tomorrow night, Vincent. Footsteps. Sienna moved back to the kitchen before they caught her listening. Vincent left. Alessandro appeared in the doorway, already putting his jacket back on. I have to go out, he said. What happened? Business. Alessandro. Stay here. Don't leave the penthouse. Vincent's posting security. You're scaring me. Alessandro crossed the room and kissed her, hard and fast and desperate. I'll be back, he said. He left. Sienna stood alone in the massive kitchen and felt the first real stab of fear since she'd signed the contract. Because she'd been playing house with a mafia boss and pretending the danger wasn't real. But it was real. And it was coming. Alessandro didn't come back that night, or the next morning. Vincent called at noon to tell her Alessandro was handling things and she should stay put. Sienna spent the day pacing the penthouse like a prisoner. By evening, she was ready to break something. The door opened around 8. Alessandro walked in looking like he'd been fighting a war. His suit was disheveled. His knuckles were bruised. There was blood on his collar that probably wasn't his. Sienna crossed the room. What happened? I handled it. That's not an answer. Alessandro poured himself a drink. His hands were shaking. Marco's dead. The room tilted. Sienna gripped the back of the couch. What? He was the one behind the warehouse fire, the meetings with Calabrese, all of it. He was planning to kill me and take over the organization. Alessandro drank. So I killed him first. You? I shot him in a warehouse in Brooklyn in front of 15 witnesses. Made sure everyone knew what happens when someone betrays me. Alessandro's voice was flat, empty. That's who I am, Sienna. That's what I do. Sienna couldn't breathe. She'd known Alessandro was dangerous, known he was violent, but hearing him say it so casually, so matter-of-factly, made it real in a way nothing else had. You killed your own underboss, she whispered. I killed a traitor. Is there a difference? In my world? No. Alessandro set down his glass and looked at her with eyes that were too calm and too empty. This is what I warned you about, he said quietly. This is why everyone leaves eventually, because loving me means accepting that I'm capable of this. Don't lie. You love me. I can see it. He moved closer. And that's going to destroy you, because I can't change what I am. I can't stop being the man who kills people when they become problems. Sienna's eyes burned. So what am I supposed to do? Leave. Take the money. Start over somewhere I can't hurt you. And if I don't want to leave? Alessandro's expression cracked, just for a second. Then you're choosing to drown with me, he said, and I'm too selfish to stop you. He kissed her, desperate, broken, like he was trying to memorize something that was already slipping away. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. I'm going to ruin you, he whispered. I know, Sienna said. And she did. But she stayed anyway. The funeral for Marco De Luca happened 3 days later. Sienna stood beside Alessandro in black designer clothes she hadn't chosen, watching a closed casket get lowered into the ground, while men in expensive suits pretended to mourn. Gabriella De Luca stood across from them, veiled in black, staring at Alessandro with eyes that promised murder. After the service, she approached. This isn't over, Gabriella said quietly. Her voice was steady, cold. You killed my brother. Your brother was a traitor, Alessandro replied. He was family. Family doesn't plot coups. Gabriella's hands clenched. You think you're untouchable because you have her. She glanced at Sienna with pure venom. But she's just a weakness, and weaknesses get exploited. Alessandro stepped between them. Touch her, he said, voice dropping to something lethal. And I'll bury you next to Marco. Gabriella smiled. You can't kill everyone who threatens you, Alessandro. Eventually, you'll run out of bullets. She walked away. Sienna's hands were shaking. Alessandro took her arm and guided her toward the car. In the back seat, Sienna finally spoke. She's going to come after me. I won't let her. You can't protect me 24 hours a day. Alessandro pulled her close. Watch me. But even as he said it, Sienna saw something in his eyes that terrified her. Doubt. Because for the first time since she'd met him, Alessandro Moretti wasn't sure he could keep her safe. And that meant everything was about to get worse. 2 weeks later, the world exploded. Sienna was shopping with Vincent. Something normal, something safe, something that felt like the old routine. When the black SUV came out of nowhere, it happened so fast she barely processed it. 1 second, they were walking toward the car. The next, men in masks grabbed her. Vincent moved instantly, gun out, shouting, fighting. But there were too many of them. Sienna screamed. Someone hit Vincent hard enough that he went down. A bag went over Sienna's head. Hands dragged her into a vehicle. Tires squealed. And then she was gone. The last thing she heard before everything went black was Vincent's voice, hoarse and desperate, shouting into his phone. They took her, boss, they took Sienna. Sienna woke up to the smell of rust and salt water. Her head throbbed where someone had hit her during the kidnapping. The bag was gone from her face, but her hands were zip-tied behind her back, and her shoulders screamed from being in the same position for what felt like hours. She was sitting in a metal chair inside what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Broken windows high up in the walls let in pale gray light. The floor was concrete stained with things she didn't want to identify. Somewhere in the distance she could hear water lapping against pylons. The docks. She was somewhere near the Brooklyn waterfront. Footsteps echoed across the concrete. Sienna forced herself to look up. Gabriella DeLuca walked toward her in a black coat and boots that clicked against the floor like a countdown. Her dark hair was pulled back severely. Her face was composed, calm. That was somehow worse than if she'd been screaming. You're awake, Gabriella said. Good. I was worried they'd hit you too hard. Sienna's mouth was dry. Where am I? Does it matter? Gabriella circled behind her. You're not leaving. Alessandro will find me. Of course he will. That's the point. Gabriella came back around to face her. Do you know what you are to him, Sienna? You're the first real weakness Alessandro Moretti has shown in 5 years. The first crack in the armor. And cracks are where you apply pressure until everything breaks. He'll kill you for this. Gabriella smiled. He already killed my brother. What's one more, DeLuca? She pulled up another chair and sat down across from Sienna like they were having coffee instead of a hostage situation. Let me tell you a story, Gabriella said. When my brother Marco was alive, he told me something interesting. He said Alessandro was planning to dismantle parts of the empire, transition away from the violent businesses our families built. He wanted to go legitimate. Sienna said nothing. Marco thought it was weakness, that Alessandro was soft, but I understood the real problem. Gabriella leaned forward. Alessandro Moretti doesn't want to be what his father made him. He wants out. And you're the excuse he's been looking for. That's not... Don't lie to me, Gabriella's voice went cold. I've watched you two together, the way he looks at you, the way he touches you when he thinks no one's watching. That's not a business arrangement. That's not a contract marriage. That's a man who found something worth leaving the empire for. Sienna's chest tightened, because Gabriella was right. So here's what's going to happen, Gabriella continued. I'm going to send Alessandro proof that I have you. He's going to come here to negotiate. And when he does, I'm going to offer him a choice. What choice? The empire or you? Gabriella stood. Because if Alessandro really is the ruthless leader everyone thinks he is, he'll choose the organization. He'll make the strategic decision. Let you die to protect what his father built. And if he doesn't, then I kill you both and take over what's left of the Moretti territories. Either way, the empire fractures. Gabriella walked toward the door. Marco was an idiot who thought violence was the only path to power, but I understand something he never did. The best way to destroy a king isn't to attack him directly. It's to take away the one thing that makes him want to keep fighting. She stopped at the door and looked back. You're that thing, Sienna, and by the time this is over, Alessandro's going to hate you for it. The door slammed shut. Sienna sat alone in the empty warehouse and felt fear turn into something colder. Calculation. Because Gabriella had made one critical mistake. She thought Sienna was just a victim waiting to be rescued. But Sienna had spent the last 4 months learning how to survive in Alessandro Moretti's world. And she wasn't going to die in a Brooklyn warehouse without a fight. But Alessandro got the video 2 hours after Sienna was taken. He was in his office when Vincent's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. The older man's face went pale as he opened it. "Boss," Vincent said quietly, "you need to see this." Alessandro took the phone. The video showed Sienna tied to a chair in a warehouse he recognized immediately. The old Calabrese shipping facility. The one Marco had been using for his side deals before Alessandro put a bullet in his head. Gabriella De Luca stepped into frame. "Hello, Alessandro," she said to the camera. "I have something that belongs to you. If you want her back, come to the Calabrese warehouse. Alone. You have 4 hours. If you bring anyone with you, she dies. If you're late, she dies. If you call the police, she dies." The video cut off. Alessandro set the phone down with hands that didn't shake because he couldn't afford to let them shake. "It's a trap," Vincent said. "Obviously. She's going to kill you both." "Probably." Vincent moved closer. "Boss, we can handle this strategically. Call in the family, surround the warehouse. Extract Sienna by force. And risk Gabriella executing her the second she hears helicopters? It's better than walking into an ambush alone." Alessandro stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. Manhattan glittered beneath him like a kingdom he'd inherited and never wanted. "My father would have let her die," Alessandro said quietly. "He would have made the strategic choice, protected the empire. That's what a real leader does." "You're not your father." "No, I'm worse." Alessandro turned back. "Because my father never would have been stupid enough to fall in love with a woman he was supposed to be using as cover." Vincent's expression shifted. "Boss, I love her, Vincent. I don't know when it happened. Probably the first time she looked at me like I was human instead of a weapon. Maybe the night she refused to leave even after I told her I'd destroy her." Alessandro's voice stayed flat, controlled. "And now Gabriella's going to use that against me. So what do you want to do?" Alessandro pulled his gun from the desk drawer and checked the magazine. "I'm going to get her back." "Alone?" "Alone. That's suicide." "Then it's suicide." Alessandro looked at his oldest friend. "But I'm not letting her die because I was too much of a coward to walk into a trap." Vincent stared at him for a long moment. Then he reached into his own jacket and pulled out a second gun. "If you're going," Vincent said, "I'm going with you." "I told you." "I know what you told me. I'm coming anyway." Vincent's jaw set. "You saved my life 8 years ago. I'm not letting you throw yours away without backup." Alessandro almost smiled. "You're fired. Fire me after we get her back." They walked out together. The warehouse was exactly as threatening as Sienna expected. She'd been alone for over an hour, trying to work the zip ties loose against the metal chair. Her wrists were bleeding. The plastic had barely budged. She was starting to panic when the door opened again. But it wasn't Gabriella. It was a man Sienna had never seen before. Late 40s, expensive suit, cold eyes. He pulled up a chair and sat down. "My name is Thomas Calabrese," he said, "and I'm the reason you're still alive." Sienna's heart hammered. "I don't understand." "Gabriella wanted to kill you immediately. Send Alessandro your body as a message. But I convinced her you're worth more alive." Thomas smiled. "At least until we're done with you." "Done with me?" "You're going to help us destroy Alessandro Moretti." "I'm not helping you do anything." Thomas pulled out a phone and showed her a photograph. It was grainy, security camera footage from somewhere public. But Sienna recognized the woman in the image immediately. Her sister. "Her name is Rebecca, isn't it?" Thomas said. "She lives in Boston, works at a hospital, has a 6-year-old daughter named Emma who just started 1st grade." Ice flooded Sienna's veins. "You touch them. We won't, as long as you cooperate." Thomas put the phone away. "Here's what's going to happen. Alessandro will arrive in approximately 2 hours. When he does, you're going to tell him you want out, that you can't handle this life, that you're leaving him. He won't believe me. Make him believe you. Sell it. Break his heart." Thomas leaned forward. "Because if he thinks you're leaving voluntarily, he'll let you go. And the second he's emotionally compromised, Gabriella will have him killed. And if I refuse? Then your sister and her daughter have a very unfortunate accident." Thomas stood. You have 2 hours to decide if Alessandro Moretti is worth their lives. He left. Sienna sat alone in the warehouse and felt something inside her chest crack apart because she'd been kidnapped, threatened, tied to a chair in a building that smelled like death. But none of that compared to the choice she was facing now. Save Alessandro and condemn her family, or save her family and destroy the man she loved. Alessandro arrived exactly on time. The warehouse door opened and he walked in alone, hands visible, no visible weapons. But Sienna knew him well enough by now to know he was armed. She could see it in the way he moved, the controlled precision that meant he was ready to kill everyone in the building if necessary. His eyes found her immediately. Something in his expression broke, just for a second. Then the mask came back. "Let her go, Gabriella," Alessandro said. His voice echoed in the empty space. Gabriella stepped out from behind a stack of crates with 4 armed men flanking her. "I don't think so," she said. "Not yet. I came alone, like you asked." "Did you?" Gabriella smiled. "Or is Vincent positioned on a rooftop somewhere with a sniper rifle?" "Vincent's not here." "Prove it." Alessandro spread his arms. "Search me." One of Gabriella's men moved forward and patted Alessandro down roughly. He found 2 guns, a knife, and what looked like a wire. The man held up the wire. "He's broadcasting." Gabriella's expression darkened. "I told you to come alone, and I told Vincent to stay in the car." Alessandro's voice stayed calm. "If I don't walk out of here in 30 minutes, he calls everyone, NYPD, FBI. Every law enforcement agency in the city descends on this location. So you have 2 choices. Let Sienna go and disappear, or kill us both and spend the rest of your life in a federal prison." "There's a third option," Gabriella said. She gestured. Thomas Calabrese appeared from the shadows. Alessandro's entire body went rigid. "Hello, Alessandro," Thomas said. "It's been a long time." "You're supposed to be dead," Alessandro said. "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated." Thomas smiled. "Your father thought he'd eliminated the Calabrese family 5 years ago, but he only killed my brothers. I went underground, waited, and now I'm back to finish what he started." Alessandro's jaw clenched. "This has nothing to do with Sienna." "Of course it does. She's your weakness, the thing you care about more than power." Thomas moved closer to Sienna's chair. "And we're going to use her to break you." He pulled out a gun and pressed it against Sienna's temple. She froze. Alessandro's hands clenched. "Don't." "Don't what? Pull the trigger?" Thomas laughed. "Why not? You killed Gabriella's brother. You killed my family. Seems fair. I'll give you anything you want. Money, territory, access to the trade routes." "I don't want your money, Alessandro. I want you destroyed." Thomas cocked the gun. "And the best way to destroy you is to make you watch her die." Sienna's breath came in short gasps. She could feel the cold metal against her skull, could see Alessandro standing 20 feet away with murder in his eyes and complete helplessness in his posture. This was it. This was how she died. But then she remembered the choice Thomas had given her, the ultimatum, and she made a decision. "Stop," Sienna said. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "I'll do it." Thomas lowered the gun slightly. "Do what?" "What you asked. I'll tell him I want out. I'll make him believe it." Alessandro's eyes snapped to hers. "Sienna, don't." "I'm sorry," Sienna said. She forced herself to look at Alessandro, to meet those gray eyes that had seen through every lie she'd ever told. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be in this world. I want out." "You're lying." "I'm not." Sienna's throat burned. "I thought I could handle it, the violence, the danger, but I can't, and I'm done pretending." "Sienna, I don't love you, Alessandro." The words tasted like poison. "I never did. This was always just about the money, and now I want to take it and leave." Silence. Alessandro stared at her with an expression she couldn't read. Then he turned to Gabriella. "Let her go," he said quietly. "Just like that?" "Just like that. She wants out. Give her the money we agreed on and let her walk away." Gabriella laughed. "You actually believe her?" "It doesn't matter what I believe. She's not part of this anymore." Alessandro's voice was empty, hollow. "This is between us now." Thomas looked at Gabriella. What do you think? I think he's more broken than I expected. Gabriella gestured to one of her men. Cut her loose. The man moved forward with a knife and sliced through Sienna's zip ties. Her hands came free. Blood rushed back into her wrists. She stood on shaking legs. Go, Alessandro said without looking at her. Get out of here. Sienna took one step, then another. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to tell him the truth, to explain that she was lying to save her family. But Thomas's threat echoed in her mind. Rebecca. Emma. So she kept walking, walked past Alessandro without looking at him, walked toward the door. Behind her, she heard Gabriella speak. Well, that was disappointing. I thought she'd at least put up more of a fight. She's smarter than you, Alessandro said quietly. She knows when to walk away. Sienna reached the door. Her hand touched the handle. And then she heard the gunshot. She spun around. Alessandro was on the ground. Blood spread across his white shirt. Gabriella stood over him with a smoking gun. Did you really think I'd let you live? Gabriella said. After everything you've taken from me. Time stopped. Sienna watched Alessandro try to push himself up, watched him collapse, watched blood pool beneath him on the concrete floor. And something inside her snapped. She'd been playing it safe, following the rules, trying to protect everyone. But Alessandro was dying, and nothing else mattered. Sienna grabbed a piece of rusted pipe from near the door and charged back into the warehouse. She swung it at the nearest guard before he could react. The pipe connected with his skull with a sickening crack. He went down. The second guard raised his gun. Sienna dove behind a crate as bullets shattered wood and concrete. Her heart hammered. She had no plan, no training, no idea what she was doing, but she wasn't leaving him. The shooting stopped. Sienna risked a glance around the crate. Gabriella was dragging Alessandro's body toward the back of the warehouse. The remaining guards were moving to surround Sienna's position. She was trapped, and then the entire front wall of the warehouse exploded inward. But Vincent came through the door like the wrath of something ancient and merciless. He had backup. A dozen men in tactical gear flooded the warehouse. Gunfire erupted. Shouting. Chaos. Sienna stayed behind the crate with her hands over her ears and her heart trying to punch through her ribs. The shooting stopped as abruptly as it started. Heavy footsteps approached. Vincent appeared around the crate. You okay? Sienna nodded. She couldn't speak. Where's the boss? Sienna pointed. Vincent moved past her and found Alessandro lying in a spreading pool of blood with Gabriella's body beside him. She'd been shot during the raid. Boss? Vincent dropped to his knees. Stay with me. Alessandro's eyes were unfocused. His breathing was shallow. Sienna, he whispered. She's alive. She's safe. She left. No, she didn't. She's right here. Vincent looked back at Sienna. Get over here. Sienna moved on autopilot. She knelt beside Alessandro and took his hand. His blood soaked through her clothes. I'm here, she said. I'm right here. Alessandro's eyes found hers. You said you didn't love me. I lied. Tears burned down her face. They threatened my family, my sister, her daughter. I had to make you believe it. Understanding flickered in Alessandro's expression. Then pain. You should have let me die. Never. Sienna, never, she repeated, fierce, desperate. You don't get to die. Not after everything. Not after making me fall in love with you. You don't get to leave me like this. Alessandro's hand tightened on hers. Barely. But enough. Ambulance is 3 minutes out, someone shouted. Vincent pressed his jacket against the wound in Alessandro's chest. Blood soaked through immediately. Stay awake, boss. Keep your eyes open. Alessandro's eyes drifted closed. No. Sienna grabbed his face. Look at me, Alessandro. Look at me. His eyes opened, barely. I love you, Sienna said. Do you hear me? I love you. And you're not dying in a Brooklyn warehouse. You're not leaving me. You promised me 6 months and we're not even halfway through. Alessandro's mouth curved slightly. Almost a smile. Contract. Breach, he whispered. Then his eyes closed and didn't open. No, Sienna said. No, no, no. Vincent pulled her back as paramedics swarmed. They worked on Alessandro with efficient brutality. Chest compressions, IVs oxygen, loading him onto a stretcher, rolling him out to the ambulance. Sienna tried to follow. Vincent caught her arm. Let them work. I need to quit. You need to stay alive. Thomas Calabrese is dead. Gabrielle is dead. But there might be others. You're not safe yet. Sienna's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the concrete floor covered in Alessandro's blood and felt everything she'd been holding together for the last 4 hours collapse. She'd lied to the man she loved, watched him get shot, nearly died herself, and now she had no idea if Alessandro was going to survive. Vincent crouched beside her. He's strong, Vincent said quietly. If anyone can survive this, it's him. What if he doesn't? Then you grieve, and you move on, and you take the money, like the contract says. Sienna looked at him. I don't want the money. What do you want? I want him alive. Vincent's expression softened. Then pray, because that's all either of us can do right now. Sienna didn't pray. She just sat in the warehouse surrounded by bodies and blood and broken glass and made a promise to the universe. If Alessandro lived, she would never leave him, contract or no contract. 6 months or 60 years. She was done pretending this was temporary. She was done lying about what she felt. And she was done walking away. Because loving Alessandro Moretti might destroy her, but losing him would kill her, and she'd already decided which one she could survive. The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and fear. Sienna sat in a plastic chair with Alessandro's blood still dried on her hands and clothes, staring at the operating room doors that had swallowed him 3 hours ago. Vincent paced nearby like a caged animal. 2 of Alessandro's men stood guard by the entrance, watching everyone who came and went with the paranoia of soldiers in hostile territory. A nurse had tried to get Sienna to clean up. She'd refused. If she washed off Alessandro's blood, it meant accepting he might die, and she wasn't ready to accept that. The doors finally opened. A surgeon stepped out, still wearing blood-stained scrubs. He looked exhausted. Vincent moved first. How is he? Alive. Barely. The surgeon pulled down his mask. The bullet collapsed his left lung and nicked the subclavian artery. We repaired the damage, but he lost a lot of blood. The next 48 hours are critical. Can we see him? Sienna asked. Her voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. He's in recovery, sedated. He won't wake up for several hours. The surgeon looked at her blood-covered clothes. Are you injured? No? You should get checked anyway. I'm fine. The surgeon nodded slowly. He's in ICU room 7, but only immediate family. She's his fiancée, Vincent said. The surgeon looked at Sienna's ring. The diamond caught the fluorescent light. Room 7, he repeated, but keep it brief. He needs rest. He walked away. Sienna stood on legs that barely held her weight and followed Vincent through corridors that all looked the same. White walls, bright lights, the constant beep of machines keeping people alive. ICU room 7 was at the end of a hallway. Through the window, Sienna could see Alessandro hooked up to more machines than seemed possible. Tubes ran into his arms, monitors tracked his heartbeat. A ventilator breathed for him in steady mechanical rhythms. He looked small. That was the part that broke her. Alessandro Moretti, the man who commanded rooms with a glance, who killed enemies without flinching, who wore power like other men wore cologne, looked small and fragile and human in a hospital bed. Go on, Vincent said quietly. I'll wait out here. Sienna pushed open the door. The beeping got louder. She moved to Alessandro's bedside and took his hand. It was cold. The monitors showed his heart beating too fast, his blood pressure too low, his oxygen saturation hovering at numbers that probably meant something terrible. Hey, she whispered. It's me. No response. Just the ventilator breathing for him. Sienna squeezed his hand. You're going to be okay. You hear me? You're going to wake up and yell at Vincent for bringing backup. You're going to complain about the hospital food. You're going to be fine. The monitors beeped steadily, unchanging. I'm sorry, Sienna said. Tears burned down her face. I'm sorry I said I didn't love you. I'm sorry I walked away. I'm sorry for all of it, but you have to wake up so I can tell you in person. You have to... Her voice broke. She pressed her forehead against their joined hands and let herself cry for the first time since the warehouse. Behind her, the door opened. Vincent stepped in. "We have a problem." Sienna looked up, wiping her face. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where Thomas Calabrese wasn't working alone." Vincent's expression was grim. "His cousin Anthony just sent word. He wants a meeting." "Tell him to go to hell." "Can't. He has leverage." "What leverage?" Vincent handed her his phone. The screen showed another video. This one featured a woman tied to a chair in what looked like a basement. She was bruised, terrified, but alive. Rebecca, Sienna's sister. The room tilted. "When?" Sienna whispered. "They grabbed her 6 hours ago, right after the warehouse." Vincent took the phone back. Anthony's message was clear. "You trade yourself for her, or she dies." "That's insane. That's the Calabrese family. Thomas might be dead, but they're not done with us yet." Sienna looked back at Alessandro's unconscious form. "He can't handle this right now, which is why you're not going to tell him. I can't just—" "You can, and you will." Vincent's voice went hard. "Boss is fighting for his life. If he wakes up and finds out you walked into another trap, it'll kill him. And if he doesn't wake up, then you going after your sister won't matter anyway. So what am I supposed to do? Let Rebecca die? No, you're going to let me handle it." "How?" Vincent pulled out his own phone and made a call. When someone answered, he spoke in rapid Italian that Sienna couldn't follow. After a minute, he hung up. "I'm calling in every favor the Moretti family has," Vincent said. "We're going to find Rebecca and extract her before Anthony knows we're coming. And if you can't, then we negotiate. But you don't trade yourself, not for anyone. She's my sister, and Boss would burn this entire city to the ground if something happened to you." Vincent moved toward the door. "Stay here. Keep him alive. I'll handle the rest." He left. Sienna sat back down beside Alessandro's bed and felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down on her chest. Her sister was being held by people who wanted revenge. Alessandro was unconscious and might not wake up, and she was sitting in a hospital room covered in blood, trying to figure out how to save everyone when she could barely save herself. The machines beeped. Alessandro's chest rose and fell with mechanical precision, and Sienna made a decision. She stood up, kissed Alessandro's forehead, and whispered, "I'll be back, I promise." Then she walked out. Vincent's car was still parked outside the hospital. Sienna knew because she'd watched him leave it there when they arrived. She also knew he kept a spare key in a magnetic box under the rear bumper because she'd seen him use it once when his main key stopped working. She found the box, found the key, and drove away before anyone could stop her. Anthony Calabrese's message had included an address, an abandoned factory in Queens, the kind of place where people disappeared and nobody asked questions. Sienna drove through the city with her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel and her heart hammering against her ribs. Every rational thought in her head said this was suicide, that she should turn around, let Vincent handle it. But Rebecca was her sister, the only family she had left, and Sienna had already lost too many people she loved. The factory loomed against the night sky like a gravestone. Broken windows, rusted metal, a parking lot full of weeds and broken glass. Sienna parked and got out. Her legs shook. She forced them steady. The front entrance was unlocked. Inside, the factory floor stretched into darkness, broken only by emergency lights that barely worked. Machinery sat abandoned and rotting. The air tasted like rust and decay. "Hello?" Sienna called. Her voice echoed. Footsteps approached from the darkness. A man stepped into the light. Late 30s, expensive suit that looked wrong in the decrepit surroundings. Dark hair, eyes that evaluated her like a butcher evaluating meat. "Sienna Vale," he said. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Where's my sister?" "Safe, for now." Anthony Calabrese gestured behind him. Two more men appeared, dragging Rebecca between them. Rebecca looked terrible. Her face was swollen, her wrist hung at an odd angle. But she was conscious. When she saw Sienna, her eyes went wide. "No," Rebecca said. "Sienna, no, you shouldn't be here." One of the men hit her. Rebecca's head snapped to the side. Sienna moved forward instinctively. Anthony raised a hand. "Easy. We're all civilized people here." Civilized people don't kidnap nurses. Civilized people don't sleep with mafia bosses either. But here we are. Anthony smiled. You know why you're here? You want revenge for Thomas. Revenge is emotional. I prefer justice. Anthony walked closer. Thomas was my cousin, my friend. Alessandro Moretti killed him in that warehouse along with Gabriella De Luca and 6 of my men. Someone has to pay for that. Alessandro's in the hospital. He might die anyway. Might isn't good enough. Anthony stopped a few feet away. Here's my offer. You for your sister. Simple trade. She walks out of here. You stay. And when Alessandro wakes up, if he wakes up, he gets to live with the knowledge that you died because of him. And if I refuse, then I kill you both and send the bodies to Alessandro's hospital room with a note explaining how you came here alone to save her. Either way, he suffers. But this way, at least your sister lives. Sienna looked at Rebecca. Her sister was crying now, shaking her head desperately. Don't, Rebecca whispered. Please don't. Sienna turned back to Anthony. Let her go first. You think I'm stupid? I think you want me more than you want her. Let her walk out that door, and I'll stay. You have my word. Anthony studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Let her go. The men released Rebecca. She stumbled forward, cradling her broken wrist. Sienna, go, Sienna said. Take care of Emma. Tell her I love her. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. Sienna met her sister's eyes. Vincent's men are outside. They'll get you to safety, but you have to go now. Rebecca hesitated. Then she ran. The sound of her footsteps faded into the distance. A door slammed. Silence. Anthony smiled. Noble. Stupid, but noble. What happens now? Now we wait. Anthony gestured to his men. Tie her up. They grabbed Sienna before she could react. Zip ties cut into her wrists again. They pushed her into a chair and secured her ankles. Anthony pulled up another chair and sat across from her. I'm going to tell you something interesting, he said. Thomas wasn't just trying to destroy Alessandro. He was trying to take over the entire Moretti empire. Gabriella was helping him. Marco too, before Alessandro killed him. They had a plan. A real one. Dismantle Alessandro's leadership from the inside while building alliances with every family that hated the Morettis. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what you died for. Anthony leaned forward. Alessandro Moretti is a dead man walking. Even if he survives the gunshot, the families are circling. They smell weakness, and weakness in our world is fatal. Alessandro's not weak. He fell in love with a nobody from nowhere. He let emotions compromise his judgment. He killed his own underboss over a woman. Anthony's smile turned cold. That's the definition of weakness. Or strength, depending on how you look at it. How romantic. You really believe that? I know Alessandro. He's more dangerous now than he's ever been, because now he has something to protect. Had, Anthony corrected, past tense, because you're about to die. He stood and pulled out a gun. Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. This was how it ended. Not in Alessandro's arms. Not after 6 months of pretending turned real. Just tied to a chair in a Queen's factory, waiting for a bullet. Anthony raised the gun. And then the entire building exploded with gunfire. But Alessandro woke up to pain that felt like someone had replaced his lungs with broken glass. The ventilator was gone. He was breathing on his own. Every breath hurt. He tried to sit up, agony ripped through his chest. A nurse appeared. Mr. Moretti, you need to stay down. Where's Sienna? I don't know who... The woman who was here. Where is she? Sir, you just came out of surgery. Alessandro ripped the IV from his arm and swung his legs off the bed. The room spun. He grabbed the bed rail to steady himself. The nurse hit a call button. I need help in here. Where the fuck is Vincent? Alessandro demanded. The door burst open, but it wasn't medical staff. It was one of Alessandro's men, the young one, Paolo. Boss, you shouldn't be... Where's Vincent? Paolo's face went pale. Queens, the old Calabrese factory. Vincent went after the girl's sister and what? Sienna went too. Alone. Before Vincent could stop her. The world narrowed to a single point. Alessandro moved toward the door. Paolo tried to block him. "Boss, you can't." Alessandro hit him. Not hard, just enough to move him aside. Then he walked out of the hospital room in a medical gown, with blood seeping through his bandages and murder in his eyes. Two more of his men were in the hallway. They saw him and moved to help. "Get me clothes," Alessandro said. "Get me a car. Get me every gun we have. Now." "Boss, you're injured." "I don't give a fuck. Move." They moved. 10 minutes later, Alessandro was in the back of an SUV wearing someone's too large suit with a Glock in his hand and enough painkillers in his system that he could almost breathe without screaming. The driver looked nervous. "Vincent said to keep you at the hospital. Drive or I shoot you and drive myself." The driver drove. Alessandro's phone buzzed. Vincent's name appeared on the screen. Alessandro answered. "Where is she?" "Inside the factory. We're moving into position, but don't wait for me. Go now." "Boss, you're in no condition. I'm 10 minutes out. If she's dead when I get there, everyone in that building dies, including you." He hung up. The SUV raced through Queens while Alessandro checked his weapons and tried to ignore the fact that every movement made his chest feel like it was tearing apart. Sienna had walked into a trap. Again. For her sister. Because that's who she was. Someone who sacrificed herself for the people she loved. And Alessandro was going to burn the entire Calabrese family to the ground for making that necessary. The factory came into view. Gunfire echoed from inside. The SUV screeched to a halt. Alessandro got out and immediately had to grab the door to stay standing. His vision grayed at the edges. Paolo appeared. "Boss, give me your vest." "What?" "Your tactical vest." "Give it to me." Paolo stripped off his vest. Alessandro pulled it on over his suit. The weight helped. Made him feel more solid. More dangerous. He checked his gun and started toward the factory. Every step sent lightning through his chest. He didn't care. Inside, the gunfire had stopped. Alessandro moved through the darkness with the efficiency of someone who'd cleared buildings like this 100 times. His men were scattered throughout the space, securing positions. Vincent appeared from the shadows. "Boss, what the fuck are you Where is she?" Vincent pointed toward the back of the factory. Alessandro moved that direction. His chest was on fire. Blood soaked through his bandages and probably through his shirt. He was running on adrenaline and fury and nothing else. He turned a corner. Found Sienna tied to a chair in the middle of a room surrounded by dead Calabrese soldiers. And standing behind her with a gun to her head was Anthony Calabrese. "Hello, Alessandro," Anthony said. "Glad you could join us." Alessandro raised his gun. "Let her go." "Or what? You'll shoot me?" "We both know you can't make that shot without risking her." "Try me." Anthony pressed the gun harder against Sienna's temple. "I don't think so." Sienna's eyes met Alessandro's. She wasn't crying, wasn't begging, just looking at him with an expression that said everything she couldn't say out loud. "I love you. I'm sorry. Don't blame yourself." Alessandro's finger tightened on the trigger. His hands were steady despite the blood loss, despite the pain, despite everything. "You have 3 seconds to move that gun," Alessandro said. His voice was cold, empty, the voice of the man his father had raised. 3. "You're bluffing." 2. Anthony's hand trembled slightly. "Alessandro." 1. Alessandro fired. The bullet hit Anthony Calabrese between the eyes. His body dropped. The gun clattered away from Sienna's head. Alessandro's knees buckled. He went down hard, his vision graying completely now. The gun fell from his hand. Vincent was there instantly. "Boss." "Get her out," Alessandro whispered. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was Sienna's face. Alive, safe, worth dying for. Then nothing. But Alessandro woke up in the hospital again. This time, Sienna was there. She sat beside his bed with her hand wrapped around his, her head resting on the mattress, asleep. She looked exhausted. Beautiful. Real. Alessandro tried to speak. His throat was raw. Sienna stirred and looked up. When she saw his eyes open, her entire face transformed. "You're awake," she whispered. "How long?" 2 days. You coded twice. They didn't think you'd... Her voice broke. You shouldn't have left the hospital. You shouldn't have gone to that factory. Rebecca is safe. Vincent got her to a secure location. She's fine. Alessandro squeezed her hand. You almost died. So did you. Again. I'm harder to kill than I look. Sienna laughed. It came out wet and broken. Don't ever do that again. Which part? Getting shot or saving you? Any of it. Alessandro pulled her closer. She climbed carefully onto the bed beside him, mindful of his injuries and all the machines still keeping him alive. I meant what I said in the warehouse, Sienna whispered against his chest. I love you. The contract doesn't matter. The money doesn't matter. I'm not leaving. You should. Too bad. Alessandro's arm tightened around her. The families are going to come after us, after you. This isn't over. I know. You could still walk away, take the money, disappear. Be safe. I don't want safe. I want you. Alessandro was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, The Calabrese family is finished. Thomas, Anthony, Gabriella, all dead. That's 3 major families gone. The power vacuum is going to cause chaos. So what do we do? We survive it, together. Alessandro looked down at her. No more contracts, no more fake engagements. This is real now. It's been real for months. I know. Sienna lifted her head to look at him. So what happens next? Alessandro's hand came up to cup her face. Next, he said, I marry you. For real this time. Not for optics, not for strategy. Because I love you, and I'm done pretending I don't. Sienna's eyes filled with tears. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. You haven't heard that many proposals. Still the worst. Is that a yes? Sienna kissed him, carefully, gently, like he might break. Yes, she whispered against his mouth. You stubborn, violent, impossible man. Yes. Outside the hospital room, Vincent stood guard with a slight smile on his face. The war wasn't over. The families were still circling. The empire was still fractured. But for the first time in 8 years, Vincent thought maybe Alessandro Moretti had found something worth fighting for that wasn't built on blood and fear. And maybe that would be enough. Alessandro spent another week in the hospital before the doctors reluctantly cleared him to leave. Even then, he wasn't supposed to be working. He was supposed to be resting, recovering, learning how to breathe without feeling like someone had filled his chest with broken glass. Instead, he held his first family meeting 3 days after getting discharged. The meeting happened in the penthouse. Neutral ground, safe ground. The kind of place where Alessandro could control every entrance and exit and make sure nobody walked out alive if they tried something stupid. 12 capos sat around the black marble conference table. Old men, mostly. The ones who'd served under Alessandro's father. The ones who'd questioned Alessandro's leadership since the day he inherited the empire at 23. The ones who'd been waiting for him to show weakness, and Alessandro had given them plenty. Marco's betrayal, the warehouse shootout, getting shot, nearly dying, twice. The whole situation with Sienna, it all added up to a leader who looked vulnerable. And in the Mafia, vulnerability was a death sentence. Alessandro sat at the head of the table with Sienna beside him, not behind him, not in another room, right there where everyone could see her. Vincent stood near the door with 2 armed guards. The room smelled like expensive cologne and old violence. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Finally, one of the older capos, Salvatore, a man who'd been with the family for 40 years, cleared his throat. We're glad you're alive, Alessandro, Salvatore said. His tone was respectful, but his eyes were calculating. But we need to discuss the state of the organization. Discuss, Alessandro said. The Calabrese family is gone. The De Lucas are gone. Marco's dead. That's 3 major power structures eliminated in under 2 months. Salvatore leaned forward. The other families are watching, waiting to see if we're weak enough to take down. Are we? That depends on you. Alessandro's expression didn't change. Say what you mean, Salvatore. You've been distracted, emotional, making decisions based on personal feelings rather than strategic advantage. Salvatore glanced at Sienna. With all due respect to Miss Vale, Bringing an outsider into the family at this level creates complications. What kind of complications? The kind where people question whether you're fit to lead. Silence. The other capos shifted in their seats. This was the moment. The challenge. Alessandro could feel the weight of it pressing down on him like physical force. He stood slowly. The movement hurt. Everything still hurt. But he didn't let it show. "Let me be very clear," Alessandro said. His voice was quiet, controlled. "I've spent the last 5 years running this organization the way my father taught me. With violence, with fear, with the understanding that power comes from making people too terrified to challenge you." He walked around the table, slowly, making eye contact with each capo. And it worked. For a while. But fear only lasts until someone stops being afraid. Then the whole structure collapses. Alessandro stopped behind Salvatore's chair. Marco stopped being afraid. So did the Calabreses. So did Gabriella De Luca. And they all died because of it. "Your point?" Salvatore asked. Salvatore, "My point is that the old way is dying, my father's way. The way where we solve every problem with a bullet and hope nobody notices the bodies piling up." Alessandro's hand settled on Salvatore's shoulder, heavy, threatening. "I'm transitioning parts of this empire into legitimate business. The violent operations get phased out. The money gets cleaned. And anyone who has a problem with that can walk out of this room right now and never come back." Nobody moved. "But," Alessandro continued, "if you stay, you follow my rules. You accept that Siena isn't going anywhere. You accept that I make decisions based on what's best for this family long term, not what feels good short term. And you accept that if you betray me, I won't hesitate to put a bullet in your head the same way I did with Marco." He walked back to his seat and sat down. The room was silent. Then Salvatore spoke. "And if we don't accept those terms?" Alessandro met his eyes. "Then we have a problem." Salvatore held his gaze for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. "I can work with that." One by one, the other capos nodded. Not because they were happy about it, because they understood that Alessandro Moretti had just drawn a line in the sand, and crossing it meant death. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. The capos filed out in silence. When the last one was gone, Vincent closed the door and turned to Alessandro. "That was risky," Vincent said. It was necessary. You just told them you're going legitimate. Half of them make their money off the operations you're shutting down. Then they'll adapt or they'll leave." Alessandro stood and immediately regretted it. His chest screamed in protest. "I'm done building an empire on bodies." "Because of her?" Vincent glanced at Siena. "Because I'm tired of being my father." Vincent was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "Fair enough." He left. Siena moved to Alessandro's side. "You okay?" "No, but I will be." "That was terrifying." "Which part?" "All of it?" Siena took his hand. "You basically just declared war on your own organization." "I declared evolution. Different thing." "Is it?" Alessandro pulled her close, carefully. His injuries still made sudden movements dangerous. "I meant what I said," he told her. "No more half measures. No more pretending. This is who we are now, you and me, building something different. What if it doesn't work? Then we fail spectacularly and probably die in the process." Siena laughed despite herself. "That's comforting. I've never lied to you about the risks." "No, you haven't." Alessandro kissed her forehead. "We're getting married next month." "That's not a question." "It's not meant to be." "What if I want a say-in when we get married?" "Do you?" Siena was quiet for a moment, then she shook her head. "No, next month is fine." "Good. Because I already told Vincent to arrange it." "You're impossible. You're marrying me anyway." "Apparently." They stood together in the massive penthouse overlooking Manhattan, and for the first time in months, the silence felt peaceful instead of dangerous. The wedding happened on a cold November afternoon in a private estate outside the city. Small, intimate, just family, which for Alessandro meant the capos who'd sworn loyalty and the handful of soldiers he actually trusted. For Siena, it meant Rebecca and Emma, who'd flown in from Boston under Vincent's protection. No press, no spectacle, no performance, Just two people who'd survived hell together deciding to make it official. Sienna wore a dress that wasn't white. Champagne, like the one from the engagement party. Simple. Elegant. The kind of thing that didn't scream Mafia wedding. Alessandro wore a black suit with no tie. Still recovering. Still moving carefully. But alive. Vincent stood as Alessandro's best man. Rebecca stood beside Sienna, her broken wrist still in a cast, tears already streaming down her face. The officiant was a judge Alessandro had on payroll. The ceremony lasted 10 minutes. No religious elements, no grand speeches, just the legal words that made them husband and wife under state law. When the judge said Alessandro could kiss his bride, he did, slowly, carefully, like Sienna might break. She didn't break. She kissed him back with everything she had. The small crowd applauded. Emma cheered loudly from the front row, and for just a moment, it felt like a normal wedding, like two normal people starting a normal life. The illusion lasted until the reception, when one of Alessandro's soldiers pulled Vincent aside with news that made his expression go dark. Vincent crossed to Alessandro and whispered something in his ear. Alessandro's jaw tightened. He excused himself from the head table. Sienna followed. What's wrong? Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow. Alessandro. He stopped and turned to face her. They were in a hallway away from the reception, alone. The Marchetti family just sent word, Alessandro said. They want to meet, discuss terms for a truce. That's good, right? In our world, a truce usually means someone's planning to break it. Alessandro's hand came up to touch her face. But that's a problem for tomorrow. Today is ours. You sure? No, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway. They went back to the reception. Sienna danced with her new husband while his soldiers watched the perimeter, and Rebecca kept Emma distracted with cake. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't safe. But it was real. And after everything they'd survived, real was enough. The meeting with the Marchetti family happened a week later. Alessandro brought Vincent and 4 armed guards. They met in a restaurant the Marchettis owned. Neutral ground, public enough that a shootout would bring police immediately. The Marchetti boss was a man named Luca, mid-50s, gray hair, sharp eyes. The kind of man who'd built his empire slowly and carefully over decades. They sat across from each other at a table in a private back room. Congratulations on your marriage, Luca said. Thank you. I heard it was beautiful, small, intimate. Luca sipped his wine. Not like the old days when weddings were about showing power. Times change. They do. Luca set down his glass. Which brings me to why we're here. I've been watching you, Alessandro. Watching how you've been running things since your father died. And I think you're making a mistake. Which mistake? Going legitimate. Cleaning the money. Shutting down operations. Luca leaned forward. You're weakening the family. Or I'm strengthening it. Depends on your perspective. The other families don't see it that way. They see a young boss who's gone soft, who's letting a woman influence his decisions. Alessandro's expression went cold. Careful. I'm not insulting your wife. I'm stating facts. Luca's tone stayed calm. The traditionalists are angry. They think you're betraying everything our fathers built. And angry traditionalists make moves. Let them try. They will, soon. Luca pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. These are the names of 6 capos from different families who are planning a coordinated hit. They're going to come after you all at once, overwhelm your defenses, kill you and anyone close to you. Alessandro opened the folder, read the names, recognized 3 of them. Why are you telling me this? Alessandro asked. Because I don't want a war. Wars are expensive. They bring law enforcement. They destabilize territories. Luca's eyes were steady. I'm offering you a choice. Join with me. Combine our families. Create something strong enough that the traditionalists won't dare challenge it. And if I refuse, then you fight them alone, and you probably die. Luca stood. Think about it. You have 72 hours before they make their move. He left. Alessandro sat alone in the back room with the folder in his hands and Vincent standing silently nearby. What do you think? Alessandro asked. I think Luca's right about the threat. I've been hearing rumors. The families are organizing. But, but allying with Marchetti means giving up independence, sharing power. Your father would never have done it. My father's dead because he refused to adapt. Alessandro closed the folder. Set up a meeting with Luca, private, just him and me. You're actually considering this? I'm considering survival. There's a difference. Vincent nodded and pulled out his phone to make the call. Alessandro leaned back in his chair and thought about Sienna waiting for him at home. About the life they were trying to build. About whether any of it mattered if he was dead. The private meeting with Luca happened at midnight in an empty parking garage. Just the two of them. No guards, no weapons. The kind of meeting where, if something went wrong, nobody would ever find the bodies. Luca arrived in a black sedan and got out alone. Alessandro stepped out of his own car. They met in the middle of the empty space. You came, Luca said. You made a compelling argument. Does that mean you're accepting my offer? It means I want to understand it better. Alessandro's eyes were hard. You want to combine families, share territory, create a united front. But what's the real play here? The real play is survival. The world is changing, Alessandro. Law enforcement is getting smarter. Technology is making it harder to hide. The old ways are dying. Luca's expression was serious. We either adapt together or we die separately. And you think I'm the right partner for that? I think you're the only one smart enough to see it coming. The others are still fighting yesterday's wars. You're trying to build tomorrow's empire. Alessandro was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'll work with you, but not as equals. I keep control of my territories, my operations, my people. We coordinate. We support each other. But the Moretti family stays independent. That's not what I offered. It's what I'm offering back. Take it or leave it. Luca studied him. You're more like your father than you think. My father would have shot you and taken your territories by force. True. Luca smiled slightly. All right, we coordinate, stay independent. But if the traditionalists come after either of us, we fight together. Agreed. They shook hands. One more thing, Luca said. Your wife, keep her safe. The people planning this hit will go after her to hurt you. I know. Do you? Because from what I've seen, you're in love with her, and love makes men stupid. Alessandro's expression went dangerous. She's protected. Protected isn't enough. You need to make her invisible. Send her somewhere they can't find her. She won't go. Then you're going to have to make her. Luca walked back to his car. The hit happens in 60 hours. Be ready. He drove away. Alessandro stood alone in the parking garage and pulled out his phone. He called Vincent. Activate the safe house protocols. Get Sienna out of the city tonight. She's not going to like that. I don't care. Do it anyway. He hung up and drove back to the penthouse. Yichim. Sienna was waiting when Alessandro walked in. She took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. What happened? She asked. We need to talk. They sat in the living room. Alessandro poured himself a drink and then told her everything, the meeting with Luca, the planned hit, the 60-hour timeline. When he finished, Sienna was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You want me to leave? I want you safe. Same thing. Sienna? No. She stood. I'm not running again. I'm not hiding while you fight a war. This isn't up for debate. Yes, it is. I'm your wife now, not your employee. You don't get to give me orders. Alessandro stood too. If you stay, you die. Is that what you want? If I leave and you die, I'll never forgive myself. That's not your decision to make. Yes, it is. Sienna moved closer. I chose this life. I chose you. And I'm not abandoning you when things get hard. This isn't hard, Sienna. This is a coordinated assassination attempt by 6 different Mafia families. They will kill you just to hurt me. Then don't let them. Alessandro grabbed her shoulders, not roughly, but firmly. You don't understand what's coming. These aren't street thugs. These are professional killers who've been doing this for decades, and they're all coming at once. So we fight them. You don't know how to fight. Then teach me. Alessandro stared at her. What? You heard me. Teach me. Show me how to use a gun, how to defend myself, how to survive like... Sienna's eyes were fierce. If I'm staying, I'm not staying helpless. Alessandro's grip on her shoulders tightened. Then he pulled her into a kiss that was desperate and frustrated and full of everything he couldn't say. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "You're going to get yourself killed," he whispered. "Not if you teach me how to survive." Alessandro was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Tomorrow morning, shooting range. Vincent will train you." "Why not you?" "Because if I'm teaching you how to shoot people, I won't be able to focus on keeping us both alive." Sienna nodded. "Okay. And if things go bad, if they get past our defenses, you run. You don't try to fight. You don't try to save me. You run, and you don't look back. Understood?" "Alessandro, promise me." Sienna looked into his eyes and saw the fear beneath the command. "I promise," she lied. Alessandro knew she was lying, but he didn't call her on it, because in 60 hours, lying wouldn't matter anymore. The next 48 hours were a controlled chaos of preparation. Vincent trained Sienna on weapons handling, how to hold a gun, how to aim, how to fire without flinching. She wasn't good, but she wasn't helpless either. Alessandro fortified the penthouse, armed guards on every floor, surveillance cameras everywhere, escape routes mapped and tested. The building became a fortress. On the morning of the 60th hour, Alessandro woke up before dawn with Sienna asleep beside him. He watched her breathe for a few minutes, memorized her face, just in case. Then he got up and started getting ready. By the time Sienna woke up, Alessandro was fully dressed in tactical gear with enough weapons to fight a small war. "It's today," Sienna said. Not a question. "It's today." She got dressed. Vincent had provided her with body armor that fit, a gun she'd practiced with, instructions to stay in the panic room unless absolutely necessary. Alessandro pulled her close one more time. "I love you," he said. "I love you too. If something happens, nothing's going to happen. If it does, there's money in an offshore account. Vincent has the details. You'll be taken care of." "I don't want money. I want you." Alessandro kissed her, hard, like it might be the last time. Then he let her go. The attack came at noon, 3 simultaneous entry points. The front entrance, the service elevator, the emergency stairwell. 15 men total, all professionals, all armed with military-grade weapons. The building erupted in gunfire. Alessandro's guards fought back from fortified positions. The penthouse turned into a war zone. Sienna stayed in the panic room like she'd been told. She could hear everything through the speakers. Gunshots, shouting, explosions that shook the walls. Alessandro's voice came through her earpiece, calm, controlled, giving orders. "Vincent, they're pushing through the south corridor." "Got it, boss!" More gunfire. Sienna gripped her gun with shaking hands and waited. The panic room door had 4 locks. Steel reinforcement. It was supposed to be impenetrable, but supposed to and actually were 2 different things. 20 minutes into the firefight, Sienna heard something outside the door. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. Someone testing the locks. She raised her gun. Her hand shook. The first lock broke. Then the second. Alessandro's voice crackled in her ear. "Sienna, report." "Someone's at the panic room," she whispered. "Vincent, get to her position." "Can't, boss, I'm pinned." The third lock broke. Sienna backed against the far wall. The fourth lock broke. The door opened. A man stepped inside. 40s, professional, gun raised. He saw Sienna and smiled. "There you are." Sienna fired. The shot went wide. The man laughed and started to raise his weapon. Another gunshot. The man's head snapped back. He dropped. Alessandro stepped over the body into the panic room, blood on his face, breathing hard but alive. "You okay?" he asked. Sienna nodded. She couldn't speak. Alessandro pulled her against him. "It's over. We got them all." "All of them?" "Every single one." Sienna started shaking. Alessandro held her while she came apart. Outside the panic room, the penthouse was destroyed. Bodies everywhere, bullet holes in the walls, blood on the marble floors. But they'd survived. Vincent appeared in the doorway. He was bleeding from a shoulder wound, but standing. "We need to move," Vincent said. "Police are coming. So is the cleanup crew." Alessandro nodded. They left the penthouse and didn't look back. 3 months later, Sienna stood on the balcony of a different penthouse in a different city. They'd left New York after the attack, too much heat, too many questions. Alessandro had holdings in Chicago, a legitimate real estate empire, clean money, no bodies. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The door opened behind her. Alessandro stepped out with 2 glasses of wine. He handed her one. "How's Rebecca?" he asked. "Good. She and Emma are settled in Boston. She started a new job at the hospital." "And you? How are you?" Sienna considered the question. "Different. Better. Still processing everything." Alessandro put his arm around her. "We did it." "Did what?" "Survived. Built something new. Got out." "Are we out, really?" "As out as people like us ever get." Alessandro looked at the city spread out below them. "The families know not to come after us. Luca's handling things in New York, and we're building something legitimate here. No more violence?" "I didn't say that, just less of it." He smiled slightly. "I'm still me, Sienna. I'm just choosing different battles." Sienna leaned against him. "I can live with that." They stood together watching the sun set over Chicago. It wasn't the fairy tale ending. It was messy, complicated, built on compromises and blood they could never wash away. But it was theirs. And after everything they'd survived, the contract, the lies, the kidnappings, the bullets, the betrayals, theirs was enough. Alessandro's hand found Sienna's, his fingers laced through hers, and the ring on her finger, the real one, not the contract one, caught the dying light. Somewhere in the distance, the city roared with life. But up here, in the quiet space they'd carved out from the chaos, Alessandro Moretti and Sienna Vale finally understood something that power and violence had never taught them. The most dangerous thing you can do is survive long enough to build a life worth protecting. And they'd survived. Against every odd. Against every enemy. Against themselves. They'd walked into the wrong room on a rainy night in Manhattan and accidentally found the one thing worth fighting for, each other. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.